"Hey ma'am, that's weapons tech work." The voice, sharp with unearned authority, cut through the low hum of the hangar lights. Brooke Warren didn't look up. Her hands, covered in a thin film of black grease and CLP solvent, continued to work a long, flexible cleaning rod deep inside the barrel of the GAU-8 Avenger cannon. The iconic nose of the A-10 Thunderbolt II, affectionately known as the Warthog, surrounded her, its brutish functional form a testament to its purpose. "Ma'am, did you hear me?" the voice insisted. This time she felt a presence beside her. She slowly withdrew the boar snake, its bristles dark with carbon scoring, and finally turned. A staff sergeant stood there, arms crossed over his chest, a clipboard tucked under one arm. He was young, with a fresh haircut, and a crisp flight suit that seemed a size too big for his ego. His name tape read, "Kowalski." "I heard you, Sergeant," Brooke said, her voice quiet but clear. Her long blonde hair was tied back in a tight, practical bun, but a few stray strands had escaped, catching the fluorescent light. She wiped a smudge of grease from her cheek with the back of her gloved hand, leaving a faint, dark streak. Kowalski's eyes did a quick, dismissive scan. He saw the loose strands of hair, the grime on her blue coveralls, and the slender frame of the woman in front of him. He did not see the coiled strength in her posture, nor the practiced, economical way she moved. He saw what he expected to see. "This is a restricted task," he said, puffing out his chest slightly. "You need to be signed off on the 781 forms and certified on this weapons system. We can't have personnel from other shops just deciding they want to play with the gun." The condescension was thick enough to taste, mingling with the familiar hangar scents of JP-8 fuel and hydraulic fluid. A few other mechanics working on a nearby F-16 had paused their work, their ratchets falling silent. An audience was gathering. Brooke ignored them, her focus remaining on the young NCO in front of her. She picked up a clean rag and began meticulously wiping down the muzzle brake. "I'm authorized," she stated simply, her tone giving away nothing. The simplicity of her answer seemed to infuriate Kowalski more than an argument would have. "Authorized by who? Let me see your line badge and your SAAC." Now, it was an order, barked with the confidence of a man who believed he held all the cards. With a sigh that was more about patience than frustration, Brooke reached into the breast pocket of her coveralls. She pulled out her common access card and held it out. Kowalski snatched it from her fingers. He glanced at it, his eyes lingering for only a second on the photo and the name, Warren. Brooke. He was looking for a rank in a unit, something to confirm his suspicions that she was a misplaced clerk or a supply troop who had wandered out of her depth. The card was slightly smudged with the same grease that covered her hands, and in the dim light the single chevron of an airman seemed to be all that was there. "Airman Warren," he scoffed, misreading the insignia in his haste to be right. "You're a long way from your dorm room. You are not on the maintenance roster for this aircraft. In fact, you're not on the roster for any aircraft in this hangar. Who is your supervisor? I want a name." He was leaning in now, trying to use his physical presence to intimidate her. It wasn't working. Brooke remained centered, her weight balanced, as if she were rooted to the concrete floor. "My supervisor is aware of my duties," she said, her gaze unwavering. "Duties?" Kowalski laughed, a short, sharp, ugly sound. "Your duty is to be where you're assigned, not here, making a mess on my jet." He gestured wildly at the cannon, then his eyes snagged on a small, subdued patch on her left shoulder. It was dark olive drab, with a black embroidered skull wearing a maroon beret. Below it were 4 simple words, "That others may live." His face twisted in a sneer of triumph. He'd found a new angle of attack, a clear violation he could use as leverage. "And what is this supposed to be?" he demanded, poking a finger toward the patch. "You think this is a joke? Some kind of video game fan club? That's an unauthorized patch, a direct violation of AFI 36-2903. You're out of uniform, in a restricted area, and interfering with a weapons system you're not qualified to touch. You're in a world of trouble, airman." He was loud now, projecting for the benefit of the other maintainers who were watching the drama unfold. He was making an example of her. He wanted to be seen as the vigilant crew chief, the guardian of standards, the unyielding authority on his flight line. He had no idea he was the one being schooled. The feel of his finger jabbing near the patch was the only thing that broke her composure, but not in the way he expected. For a fraction of a second, the cavernous, artificially lit hangar dissolved around her. The scent of solvent and jet fuel was replaced by the acrid smell of burnt cordite and the metallic tang of blood. The low hum of the lights became the deafening, percussive roar of a Pave Hawk helicopter's rotor wash kicking up a storm of Afghan dust and gravel. She wasn't standing on smooth concrete anymore, but on the shifting scree of a mountainside in the Korangal Valley. The heavy weight of her medical pack and body armor settled on her shoulders, a familiar, crushing comfort. Her hand in that fleeting memory wasn't holding a cleaning rag. It was clamped over a bleeding wound on the leg of a downed A-10 pilot, his face pale with shock beneath his visor. In her ear, a voice crackled over the radio, urgent and strained, calling out grid coordinates under a hail of enemy fire. The patch on her shoulder felt heavy, a talisman soaked in the sweat and adrenaline of that moment, a promise she had kept. The flash of memory was gone as quickly as it came. Her eyes refocused on Staff Sergeant Kowalski's smug face. The cold, controlled calm returned to her, but now it was tinged with something else. It was the quiet, unshakable certainty of a person who had faced far worse things than a puffed-up NCO on a power trip. Across the hangar, leaning against a large yellow tool chest, Master Sergeant Coles had been watching the entire exchange. He was a grizzled veteran of 3 decades, a man whose knuckles were permanently stained with hydraulic fluid and whose eyes had seen generations of young airmen come and go. He'd seen arrogance before, but this was different. He'd initially started walking over to defuse the situation, to tell Kowalski to stand down. But then he saw the patch on the woman's shoulder. He stopped dead in his tracks. His blood ran cold. Unlike Kowalski, he knew exactly what that skull in the maroon beret meant. He knew the meaning of the words stitched beneath it. He'd served with pararescuemen PJs before. He knew the legends, the stories of their impossible bravery, their unwavering commitment to leaving no one behind. And he knew from a wing-level briefing just the week before that they had a very special guest on base, a living legend, tasked with a critical project. Coles looked at Kowalski, who was now puffing himself up for a final verbal assault, and then back at the woman, who was standing with the patience of a predator. He realized this situation was far above his pay grade to handle directly. This wasn't a disciplinary issue. It was a 5-alarm fire of disrespect heading directly for Kowalski and potentially the entire maintenance group. He slipped back into the shadows of a row of lockers, pulling his phone from his pocket. He scrolled through his contacts with a sudden urgent purpose. His thumb found the name he was looking for, Colonel Matthews, MXG/CC. The maintenance group commander. He pressed the call button. The phone rang once. Matthews, a gruff voice answered. "Sir, it's Master Sergeant Coles out in Hangar 3, he said, his voice low and rushed. "Sorry to bother you, sir, but you need to get down here. Right now." "What is it, Coles? Is it about the engine swap on 625? "No, sir," Coles said, his eyes darting back to the scene. Kowalski was now gesturing for the woman to follow him, presumably to the maintenance office. She wasn't moving. "Sir, Staff Sergeant Kowalski is trying to eject a PJ from the flight line." There was a moment of dead silence on the other end of the line. "A what?" "A pararescueman, sir. He's reading her the riot act in front of the whole day shift." "It's not a good look, sir." Coles took a breath. "I think it's her, sir. The one from the briefing, Sergeant Warren." The silence that followed was even heavier. Then the colonel's voice came back, no longer gruff but sharp and dangerously focused. "Stay there, Master Sergeant. Don't let him take her anywhere. I'm on my way." The line went dead. Inside the sprawling headquarters of the 355th Maintenance Group, Colonel David Matthews slammed his phone down on his desk. His face, normally a mask of calm command, was a thundercloud of disbelief and fury. "Jessica," he roared. His executive officer, a sharp young captain, appeared in the doorway instantly. "Sir, get the rescue squadron commander on the line. Now, tell him it's a Code 1 issue regarding his personnel, and get my staff car to the front entrance 60 seconds ago." He was already grabbing his flight cap from its stand, his movements clipped and efficient. He strode over to his computer, his fingers flying across the keyboard. He typed in the name Warren Brooke A. and hit enter. Her official file bloomed onto the screen, and the sight of it made him stop cold. The audience-only reveal was stark and overwhelming. The photo showed the same woman from the hangar, but her hair was pulled back under a maroon beret, her face serious, her eyes radiating an intensity that the dim hangar lighting had hidden. The screen was a cascade of elite qualifications: Technical Sergeant Brooke Warren, United States Air Force pararescueman, combat diver, static line jump master, military freefall parachutist, SERI specialist. The list went on. Then came the decorations. The system blinked as it loaded the classified attachments: Air Force Cross, Silver Star, Purple Heart, with 1 oak leaf cluster, multiple air medals, each adorned with a small bronze V for Valor. Her current duty title wasn't Airman. It was CSAR Integration Advisor, Air Combat Command. She was here, on this base, to rewrite the book on how A-10’s protected downed rescue teams, a doctrine she was uniquely qualified to develop because she had lived it, bled for it, and survived it. The colonel felt a knot of ice form in his stomach. One of his staff sergeants was at this very moment trying to discipline one of the most decorated enlisted women in the entire Air Force. Back in the hangar, Kowalski had reached the end of his patience. Brooke's silent refusal to be intimidated, her immovable calm, had pushed him over the edge. He interpreted her stillness not as strength, but as insolent defiance. "All right, airman, that's it. You've had your chance," he snarled, his voice low and menacing. "You are willfully disobeying a direct order from a non-commissioned officer. I am officially calling security forces to have you escorted off my flight line." He pulled out his own phone, his thumb hovering over the number for the Base Defense Operations Center. "We'll have your line badge revoked permanently, and I will personally walk this unauthorized patch over to your first sergeant and recommend you for an Article 15 for fraudulent wear of insignia and dereliction of duty. You are done here. Your little game is over." It was his final, arrogant overreach. The threat was absolute, the accusation of fraud a deep and unforgivable insult. He was so consumed by his own authority that he didn't hear the sound at first, the high-pitched whine of electric motors as the massive multi-ton hangar doors began to slide open. A wave of bright, hot Arizona sunlight flooded the cavernous space, silhouetting a black staff car that had screeched to a halt just outside. It was followed closely by a dusty blue pickup truck with the rescue squadron's green feet emblem stenciled on the door. The entire hangar froze. The ambient noise of work ceased completely. Every head turned toward the sudden intrusion of light and authority. The doors of the staff car opened. Out stepped Colonel Matthews, his silver eagle insignia glinting on the collar of his flight suit. Beside him emerged his command chief, a woman with silver-wreathed chevrons on her sleeves and an expression that could curdle steel. From the pickup truck, a lieutenant colonel, the rescue squadron commander, and his own senior master sergeant, also a woman, disembarked. They moved not with anger but with a chilling, synchronized purpose, their boots crunching on the tarmac as they strode into the hangar. The four of them, a concentrated phalanx of command, walked directly toward the A-10. They walked past the other mechanics who now looked terrified. They walked past the row of tool chests and support equipment. They walked directly toward the tableau at the nose of the jet, Staff Sergeant Kowalski, phone in hand, mid-threat, and Technical Sergeant Brooke Warren standing perfectly still, her hands resting calmly at her sides. Kowalski's jaw went slack. He fumbled with his phone, nearly dropping it. His face, flushed with righteous anger moments before, turned the color of chalk. He snapped to a clumsy, terrified semblance of attention. Colonel Matthews ignored him completely. His eyes were locked on Brooke. He and his entire command team stopped 3 feet in front of her. In the dead silent hangar, the colonel's voice was like a crack of thunder. He brought his heels together, his back ramrod straight, and rendered a sharp, perfect salute. "Sergeant Warren," he said, his voice ringing with a respect that bordered on reverence. "On behalf of the entire 355th Wing, I want to apologize for this interruption. I am Colonel Matthews, the Maintenance Group Commander. Please continue with your work." Brooke slowly wiped her greasy right hand on a clean rag tucked into her pocket, then returned the salute with the same crisp precision. "No interruption, Colonel," she replied, her voice even. "Staff Sergeant Kowalski was just clarifying some local procedures." The colonel held his salute for a moment longer before dropping it. He then turned, his gaze finally falling upon the pale, trembling staff sergeant. His eyes were chips of ice. His voice, however, was not loud. It was worse. It was a low, controlled burn that carried across the entire hangar. "Maintainers," he began, his voice rising to address the entire gathered crowd. "Look here. Take a good look. For those of you who did not attend last week's briefing, or for those who did not pay attention, allow me to introduce you to the person Staff Sergeant Kowalski has been attempting to remove from this flight line." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. "This is Technical Sergeant Brooke Warren. She is a pararescueman. 2 months ago, during a combat rescue operation in a contested zone that you have only read about on the news, her Pavhawk helicopter was shot down. As the sole conscious survivor of the crash, and with 2 broken ribs and a severe concussion, she pulled the wounded pilot from the burning wreckage, established a defensive perimeter, and single-handedly held off an enemy assault for 3 hours, all while administering life-saving medical care to her pilot. When the A-10's finally arrived on station, she was down to her last magazine, using her own body to shield her patient from shrapnel. A collective silent gasp seemed to pass through the assembled airmen. Kowalski looked as if he might faint. "The patch on her shoulder," the colonel continued, his voice hardening as he pointed toward it, "was not purchased from an online store. It was hand-stitched and given to her by the A-10 pilot, whose life she saved that day. A pilot from this very wing. She is here, at my personal invitation, and by order of the Commander of Air Combat Command, to get her hands on every system of this aircraft. She is cleaning that cannon because she wants to know, intimately, every single thing that can go wrong with it in the field, so the next pilot who has to protect a PJ on the ground doesn't have to worry about a weapons jam. She has my personal, unrestricted authorization to be anywhere on this base, at any time. Do I make myself clear? Yes, sir. The response was a ragged, unified shout from every corner of the hangar. The colonel turned his full attention back to Kowalski, who seemed to shrink under the weight of his gaze. The command chief stepped forward, her expression severe. "Staff Sergeant," she said, her voice quiet but carrying immense authority. "Your duty as an NCO is to execute the mission and to lead and develop your airmen. You failed in your most basic responsibility today. You did not verify. You did not de-escalate. You saw a young woman with blonde hair and you made an assumption. You let your bias override your training and your professionalism. You didn't just disrespect a fellow service member, you disrespected a hero who has sacrificed more for that flag than you can possibly imagine." Just as the rebuke reached its peak, Brooke took a half-step forward. "Chief, Colonel," she said, her voice cutting through the tension. With all respect, Staff Sergeant Kowalski was trying to protect his aircraft. His standards are high. We need crew chiefs with high standards. She then looked directly at Kowalski, her eyes holding no malice, only a profound sense of duty. "The standard is the standard for everyone, Sergeant. It doesn't have a gender. It doesn't have a rank. It just is. Don't ever soften the standard. Just learn to apply it fairly to everyone you meet. That's all." Her words, a lesson in leadership delivered with grace under pressure, hung in the air. It was not an excuse for his behavior but a course correction, a piece of wisdom from someone who had earned the right to give it. As she spoke, the image of the patch's origin flashed in her mind once more, this time with perfect clarity. She saw herself years younger, sitting on the dusty ramp of a Pave Hawk after a mission. Her face was caked in grime and dried blood. An A-10 pilot, his own flight suit torn and his arm in a sling, sat beside her. He was clumsy with his one good hand as he pressed a small, crudely stitched patch into her palm. It was the skull, the beret, the words, "I heard your motto is that others may live," he'd said, his voice thick with emotion. "Well, I'm living because of you, because of what you did up there. Thank you, Sergeant, thank you." The memory was not a ghost, it was an anchor, the source of the quiet strength she wore as comfortably as her uniform. In the weeks that followed, a quiet but profound shift occurred across the base. A mandatory training session on unconscious bias was held for all NCOs, led by the Wing's command chief herself. A new Know Your Wingman initiative was launched, featuring short video interviews with airmen from diverse and often overlooked career fields, showcasing the incredible talent hidden in plain sight. Brooke's interview, in which she spoke only of her team and her mission, was the most watched. The standard operating procedures for flight line and restricted area access were updated, with a new emphasis on professional, respectful, and thorough verification of all personnel, regardless of appearance. The change was real and institutional. One evening, months later, Kowalski was at the base combat arms range, practicing for his annual M4 qualification. He was struggling, his shots straying wide of the target, his frustration mounting with every misplaced round. He was so focused on his own failure that he didn't notice the person who sat up in the lane next to him, until he heard the sound of slow, rhythmic, and impossibly precise shooting. Thumping, 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 each shot a perfect bullseye. He glanced over. It was Sergeant Warren. She was dressed in civilian range clothes, her blonde hair in a simple ponytail, but she handled the rifle with a familiar, terrifying competence. She finished her magazine, made the weapon safe, and laid it on the bench. Then she walked over to him. She didn't mock him. She didn't even mention the hangar. She just pointed at his target. "You're anticipating the recoil," she said, her voice calm and instructive. "You're jerking the trigger instead of squeezing it. Focus on your front sight post. Keep it perfectly still, and let the break surprise you." Kowalski looked from his target to her face. He saw no judgment, no lingering anger. He swallowed hard, the lump in his throat feeling like a stone. "Sergeant," he began, his voice barely a whisper. I'm sorry, for that day. There's no excuse." Brooke met his gaze and gave a small, single nod of acknowledgement. "You love that jet, Kowalski. I get it. Your passion is in the right place, you just need to aim it better." She gave a tiny smile. "Now let's fix your trigger press. The standard is the standard, right?" He looked at her, a true NCO, a leader, a mentor, and for the first time, he saw her clearly. If you were inspired by Brooke's story of quiet strength and professionalism, please like this video and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe to She Chose Valor for more stories honoring the incredible women who serve and have served our nation.